Hey guys, Mrs. Traver here. I'm going to walk through with you the plan for today, Tuesday, May 14th, while I am not there. First things first, we're going to walk through this warm-up together, and then I'll show you about the 9.4 through 9.6 worksheet, and then we'll go from there. So let's first look at this warm-up. We've got a quadratic, and we're going to solve it in 3 different ways. I'm going to try to kind of prove a point here with showing you these 3 ways. So let's jump right to that. Here was the quadratic that I just had on that warm-up. I'm going to move my screen a little bit. And let's solve it first with the quadratic formula. That's what we've been doing. So we've got x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Hopefully you're singing that in your head by now. So let's plug it in. We've got negative b, so negative 16 is 16 plus or minus the square root of b squared. So negative 16 times negative 16 is just regular 16 squared, which is 256 minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 63, all over 2a, so all over 2 times 1. And let's do a bunch of simplifying inside this radical. As I was showing you in class, you can type everything inside the radical in your calculator exactly as written. Save you some time a little bit. So we've got 16 plus or minus the square root of 4 over 2. And in this case, that is 16 plus or minus 2 over 2. So we've got our final answer. X equals 16 plus 2 is 18, divided by 2 is 9. 16 minus 2 is 14, divided by 2 is 7. So x equals 9 or 7. So that's the quadratic formula way. Let's do it again, but instead, let's do it with complete the square. So we'll do the same guy. I'm going to rewrite my equation x squared minus 16x. Let's move that 63 over to the other side and make it negative to make room for our perfect c. So we've got b over 2 quantity squared. Remember, that was our special term. So in this case, 16 over 2 squared, so 8 squared. So I need to add 64 to both sides is my special number. And then I can factor the left and the right, which this one will end up being x minus 8 quantity squared. And over here, I've just got 1. And then to solve, I need to take the square root of both sides. So on the left, my square root and my squared goes away, and I just have x equals 8. And on the right, I have plus or minus square root of 1, which is plus or minus 1. Add 8 to the other side, and I've got 8 plus or minus 1. So x equals 8 plus 1 is 9, and x equals 8 minus 1 is 7. So got the same answer again. Let's do it one more time, and let's factor. So I started with, I'll write down here, x squared minus 16x plus 63. And we're looking for factors of 63 that add to negative 16. There's not a lot of factors of 63. The pair that I know is 7 and 9. And if they were both negative, then they would give me a negative 16. So I could have jumped right to x minus 7, x minus 9. And this one would have given me an x equals 7, and this one would have given me an x equals 9, which again is the same answer. So my point in doing all this is to notice that there's several ways to solve a quadratic, and some are easier than others. I kind of went from hardest down to easiest. And the big deal here is recognizing which way is easiest for the specific quadratic you have. So without further ado, let's look at the worksheet, and then I'll show you not really notes, but I just want to kind of look through it with you so you can watch and see what's going on with this worksheet. So let's look at what you've got for today. You've got a worksheet over 9.4 through 9.6. 9.4 was factoring to solve. 9.5 was factoring with complete the square method to solve. And then 9.6 was the quadratic formula. So it's got some of each. And then you've got a paper version that will be handed out to you. But here's what it looks like. Notice in the beginning, I just want to remind you of each way. There's some that we haven't done in a while, but these ones are pretty straightforward. You just square root both sides and simplify, and you get your answer on problems like 1 and 2. You could also factor, complete the square, or use the quadratic formula. So there's 2 of each. and they're set up nicely for you to do so. Be careful, you need it to be in a standard form for every one of these before you get going. So like I see right off the bat, this one is not in standard form yet, so you'll need to do that before you start factoring, for example. Then on the back, it says solve using any method, and you want to pick whatever method is best for you. So that's what I want to do is kind of look at when is a good way. You've got, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 16 of those to do in the back, and you can solve using any way. So I want to show you how to find the best way for any type of problem. So like I said, we're not going to take these notes. I don't need you to write these down, but I will post this on Classroom as well so you have it. But here's kind of the mindset. The easiest one to do is factoring. So that would be my game plan first, is to check and see if I could factor. If you can factor, that's looking for doing this x that we've always done with factors of -6 that add to 5, or if there's an a out front, factors of whatever a times -6 is that add to 5. And in this case, that was -6 and 1, for example. And then we were able to solve. So if you can easily factor, then do that, because that's the quickest way to go about it. If you want to complete the square, then my advice to you is to look for a problem where two things are the case. First off is that your a term is 1. If it's not 1, don't use complete the square. There's a way to do that, but honestly, I didn't show it to you, and it's not necessary. It takes too long. You should just use a different way. So if your a term isn't 1, don't try to complete the square. It's kind of a big mess and waste of time. Second thing you need, other than your a term being 1, is it's nice if your b term is even. If it isn't, you'll have to deal with fractions the whole time, and I know how much you guys love fractions. So a is 1 and b is even. So here's my example of that one. I wrote out all of the steps for us. But if our a term is 1, there it is 1, and our b term is even, there it is 6, then you can complete the square. As a reminder, what we're doing first is moving that c to the other side. I made it positive when I did. I found my perfect c by taking 6, cutting it in half, and then squaring it to get 9. So I added 9 to both sides. And then I did some factoring on the left, some simplifying on the right, square rooted both sides, and then simplified again, took out that square that I got rid of. Square root of 16 is 4, subtracted 3 to the other side, and then evaluated. So looks like a lot of steps, but you guys are pretty good at complete the square. So if that's the easiest way to go about it, here's the caveats that you kind of want to follow to make sure that's the best way. Lastly, you can always use quadratic formula, and that'll work for any quadratic. However, it's like way quicker to factor for some problems. So if that's the case, like we showed in our warm-up, it was way quicker to factor than to use the quadratic formula. But here's one where notice our a is not 1. Our middle term is b, but this one would have been a pain in the butt to factor. Actually, matter of fact, you couldn't factor this guy if you tried, because there's no factors of 15 that add to 4. So that wouldn't have even worked for you if you tried it. So at that point, I would just plug it in the quadratic formula. I picked a creepy one here because inside the radical, our discriminant was 76, which I kind of had to highlight a little bit. But I broke down 76 so that I could simplify it. And then I noticed that 4, 2, and 6 are all even, so I cut them in half. And I got a final answer that looked like that. So obviously, quadratic formula is the messiest of them all, but it works for any. So it's kind of got pros and cons. So you can use this sheet that I'll post online to kind of help you throughout your worksheet that you're doing. So again, this worksheet is what you're working on today. That is going to be graded tomorrow. So show your work on it, decide which way you're using, and write all the work on that paper, because we're going to look through it tomorrow. If you have no work, you're getting no points. I want to see what you're doing so we can look at it and move forward from there. I will see you guys tomorrow, and I think that's it for today. See you then.